Welcome back to the Explainer, everyone. Okay, let's just jump right in because we have a lot to cover. June 17th, 2026. Mark that date down, because it was literally the night the tech world completely shattered our expectations. And I'm talking across three massive, totally distinct sectors: gaming, space exploration, and artificial intelligence. Today we're going to look at the hard data and, frankly, the pretty brutal realities behind a series of events that didn't just make a few headlines. They absolutely rewrote the rules of the tech industry.
So why are we obsessing over this specific date? Well, you kind of have to grasp the sheer magnitude of what went down in a single 24-hour window. I mean, we saw devastating, unprecedented studio closures from one of gaming's absolute titans. Then we had an audacious space rescue mission that honestly sounds like a sci-fi movie. And, maybe most impactfully, a massive, undeniable upset in the global AI race that completely broke an established monopoly.
Here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, Xbox's brutal economic reality. Second, space as a service. Third, the multipolar AI revolution. And finally, we'll wrap up with the new tech world order. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Part 1, Xbox's brutal economic reality. Guys, we are looking at the most concentrated, single-day contraction in Xbox's entire 23-year history. The human and creative cost of this corporate restructuring, it's staggering. Think about this. Just 9 days prior to this announcement, these critically acclaimed studios, Ninja Theory, Double Fine, and Compulsion Games, were literally on stage at the Xbox Game Showcase, getting thunderous applause for their new projects. And now, they're listed at high risk. They're facing imminent closure or being spun off entirely. We're talking about the masterminds behind masterpieces like Hellblade 2 and Psychonauts 2. So you've got to ask, why on earth would Microsoft just gut its own prestige talent?
Well, the answer comes down to some really brutal math. Just look at the scale of these numbers. Following Microsoft's absolutely massive $68.7 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard, the pressure from Wall Street to actually show a return on investment just became absolute. Take Hellblade 2. It's an artistic triumph, and it probably generated around $150 million in revenue. Now hey, that's a really solid number for a standalone AA game. But compare that to Call of Duty. Call of Duty pulls in over $3 billion every single year. The harsh reality here is that smaller, highly creative studios just can't justify their operating costs when they're being measured against these massive multi-billion-dollar juggernauts.
What this means is Xbox is executing a massive, massive strategic pivot. They're actively shifting away from those mid-tier AA games and just bulldozing forward with giant franchises. And notice the timing of their next move here. They added EA Sports FC 26 to Game Pass right in the middle of the 2026 World Cup. That is definitely not a coincidence. It's proof that Xbox is doubling down on huge, mainstream blockbusters designed to drive mass subscriptions, rather than holding on to a diverse, creatively risky portfolio. At the end of the day, profitability is officially trumping artistry. Which kind of brings us to a fascinating parallel. As the gaming industry is slamming into this incredibly harsh economic reality of, consolidation and hyper-commercialization, what happens when space operations undergo a massive commercial shift of their very own? Let's look at Part 2, Space as a Service.
Right now, we are watching low Earth orbit transition from this realm of pure government-led exploration into a straight-up infrastructure-as-a-service industry. I mean, just look at this number, 10 meters by 10 meters. That is the staggering size of AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird satellite antennas that SpaceX recently launched. We are talking about massive, incredibly advanced signal arrays roughly the size of a tennis court. These are literally the largest commercial communications arrays ever placed in orbit. And the crazy part? They aren't for deep space research. Nope, they're for your cell phone.
When you compare the economics here, it's wild. Traditional satellite internet, like Starlink, requires this hefty $599 upfront cost for the user hardware, plus a $120 monthly subscription. Bluebird fundamentally flips that equation on its head. It requires absolutely zero user hardware. It just uses your existing, completely unmodified 4G or 5G smartphone. This direct-to-cell architecture is a total game changer, because it instantly extends network coverage to an addressable market of 5.6 billion mobile users around the globe. Space isn't just for astronauts anymore, guys. It's literally an extension of your local cell tower.
But communications? That's not the only service getting commercialized up there. Take NASA's Swift Observatory. It's this 22-year-old telescope that maps the most energetic explosions in the universe, right? Well, it was actually falling out of orbit due to atmospheric drag from the solar maximum. Now, in the old days, this telescope would have just slowly degraded and burned up in the atmosphere. But today, NASA just went out and hired a commercial startup called Catalyst Space Technologies to act as basically a cosmic tow truck. I mean, how cool is that?
The mission timeline for their Link spacecraft unfolds incredibly fast. It starts with a June 2026 launch, hits orbital insertion 30 minutes later, does an autonomous rendezvous over 3 to 5 days, performs a super delicate robotic capture, and then finishes with a 6 to 12-hour thruster burn to boost Swift right back to a stable altitude. The really incredible takeaway here is that orbital maintenance, saving a dying multi-million-dollar scientific instrument, is now just a mature commercial service. You can literally just contract it out to a private company.
So if space is shedding its governmental exclusivity and basically becoming this multi-corporate domain, what exactly is happening back on Earth with the most critical technology of our time? How is the AI landscape suddenly becoming multipolar?
That brings us to part 3, the multipolar AI revolution.
Okay, this is where the established rules of the tech hierarchy were completely rewritten practically overnight. If we look at the Frontier SWE benchmark, which is pretty much the industry's most rigorous test for complex, long-horizon software engineering, we see something crazy. Chinese AI company Z.AI dropped a new open weights model called GLM 5.2, and it scored a 74.4. It officially edged out OpenAI's GPT 5.5, which got a 73.4, and is sitting just a hair shy of Claude Opus 4.8. For a massive 753 billion parameter open model to hit this level of coding capability, it's a historic upset. It objectively disrupts the established Western AI hierarchy we've all gotten so used to.
But honestly, the score isn't even the most shocking part. It is the economics. The cost disparity here is just dramatic. GLM 5.2 costs just $5.80 per million tokens. Meanwhile, GPT 5.5 costs $35. That is a massive 6x cost advantage for the Chinese model. Z.AI managed to achieve this parity through extreme algorithmic efficiency and state-backed funding, completely bypassing the hurdles of US advanced chip embargoes. They basically proved that massive capital and software optimization can outmaneuver hardware restrictions.
And functionally speaking, the thing is an absolute beast. GLM 5.2 boasts a completely stable 1 million token context window, literally doubling GPT 5.5's 500K window. To put that into perspective, with a window that big, GLM 5.2 can simultaneously process and understand 15 to 20 medium-sized software repositories all at once. If you're a developer trying to debug a really complex, interconnected microservices architecture, this massive memory window makes it a vastly superior tool.
But right on the heels of that massive release, another Chinese tech giant, Weibo, dropped a model that forced the entire AI research community to pause and ask one critical question. Are we measuring real intelligence or just the ability to beat the test? And here's exactly why they're asking that. Weibo released VibeThinker 3B. It has just 3 billion parameters. That's tiny. Yet on specialized mathematical benchmarks like AMIE 2026, it matched the performance of giant 671 billion parameter models. It is blazing fast and it's small enough to run completely locally on just a standard laptop with 16 gigs of RAM. Now it achieves this through verifiable reasoning, which means it's heavily specialized. It has incredibly narrow expertise and it's super brittle if you ask it general knowledge questions outside its training. But the point is, it proves you don't need a multi-billion-dollar data center to achieve state-of-the-art reasoning in specific, highly targeted tasks.
Finally, Part 4, the new tech world order.
So, what's the big picture here? What should you actually take away from this explainer? Well, first, the gaming industry has fundamentally shifted. Artistic merit and critical acclaim, they just don't guarantee survival anymore. Profitability and massive franchise scale are what keep the lights on. Second, space is officially mundane, but in the best way possible. It's a commercialized infrastructure-as-a-service domain where satellites act like cell towers and aging telescopes get literal commercial tow trucks. And third, the AI monopoly is decisively broken. We are officially in a multipolar landscape where efficiency, open weights, and massive cost reductions are driving the future, not just raw compute power from a single geographic region. The old rules simply do not apply anymore.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty vital question to ponder. If artistry in tech doesn't guarantee survival, if the frontier of space is now just commercial infrastructure, and if global AI dominance is completely fleeting, how will you adapt your skills, your business, and your mindset to thrive in this rapidly evolving new reality? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring these massive shifts with me today, everyone. Stay curious, and as always, keep learning.